Senator McDonald. Senator Rice.
Thanks, Acting Deputy President. I'm rising today to convey the Greens' support for this disallowance of these regulations, the Aviation Transport Security Amendment, Security Controlled Airports Regulations 2014. In considering whether the Greens were going to support the disallowance of these regulations, I basically was taking three issues into consideration. One, will these regulations actually make aviation and air travel more safer? Secondly, if they do, then what are the costs of doing so? And as the debate tonight has already touched upon, who pays for those costs? And three, is this solution that has been now quite a long time in the making, are these regulations, are these new security arrangements and the costs that they are going to impose upon regional airports, are they fit for purpose in this new era that we are now in? Because it is absolutely certain that in this COVID-19 era, and I actually won't say post-COVID because I think it's going to be around for a long time, that aviation is going to be very different. We are not going to be going back to as it was before. So thinking about these three things, firstly, and no, I want to say fundamentally underlying all of this is, as it sounds like there is unanimous agreement across this chamber, that aviation connecting regional communities with each other, connecting regional communities with the capital cities is of fundamental importance. It is critical for people who live, who work, who visit regional communities, for them to have safe and efficient and affordable air travel. And it's something that for those of us that live in the cities, we just take for granted that we can travel affordably to other parts of our country. But I know that it's not something that can happen, and that the quote that Senator Patrick told us, that it's costing more to get to Bali from Adelaide than to that's right. It's cheaper to get to Bali from Adelaide than it is to get to Whyalla. Just underlines the craziness and how the cost of aviation across this country is not fairly apportioned. So, going back to my 3 points in deciding whether we were going to support this disallowance. Firstly, will these new security regulations actually make air travel more safer? And I think there is certainly having better screening at airports. Yep, that's great. And any airport that has these new screening procedures in, you would think that it is likely to make the air travel from that airport safer than it was before. But there are still regional airports around Australia that aren't going to have any screening. There are still airports where, because of the small throughput of passengers, the decision has been made that it's just not worth the cost impost to be putting this screening in. The passenger load is not high enough, the risk is considered to be low enough. But then that really raises the question, I mean, if you're actually trying to do damage and do harm, and you know which airports have got screening at them, well then why wouldn't you actually go and board a plane from one of the airports that hasn't got screening at it? So the whole notion that putting in increased security at particular airports is going to overall make aviation safer, I think is questionable. I think if we had a model that said, yep, we are having screening at absolutely every airport, well then you could say yes, that is definitively going to make aviation safer. And in all of the consideration through committees, through the RAT committee, through various inquiries that we've been talking about this, I am actually yet to be convinced and to see a watertight case that these new security measures are actually really definitively going to make aviation that much safer. But secondly, let's just say, well, let's put that aside. Let's say, yes, it definitely is. Well, then what is the cost of doing so? And who should pay for those costs? And again, this is where it comes down to, there's been a risk assessment that's made that now that aircraft that carry over 40 passengers, that they're going through airports, that those airports will have to have these security measures. We've heard it's going to cost $1 million a year in Whyalla. We've heard from Senator Davey that $30 per person in regional airports. There is a cost to doing so. And so what I have not heard until, in fact, in this chamber in the last half an hour, is how these costs are going to be apportioned fairly. Because up until now, these costs have basically just been said, well, it's the owners of the airports that are going to have to pay for them, which are usually local governments, and that costs are just going to be passed on to the travelling public, making the already unaffordable regional air travel even less affordable. I'm very interested to hear the contributions from our national senators about what they have negotiated. I actually want to hear the announcement. Come on, tell us. What is the nationwide solution? What is the nationwide price that has been negotiated? What has been negotiated so that regional Australians won't face disproportionate cost increases and that these costs won't be passed on unfairly? This is an entirely new context that we are considering this disallowance in today. And if they were really wanting to get the support of all of this chamber to not support this disallowance, well, all of that information should have been put on the table. We should have heard an announcement with the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister standing side by side today to say how the new cost arrangements were going to occur. Then I'm sure that Senator Patrick might have considered withdrawing his disallowance. But we haven't heard that, so we just have to take it on trust, on faith that somehow the Nationals have negotiated a better deal. I want to see that better deal, because otherwise these new regulations are going to put an unjustifiable and huge cost impost on regional Australia that is going to make, for all of the wonderful regional tourism attractions, the regional economic incentives, the desire to decentralise, it is going to undermine all of those purposes. And that then gets me to my third point, because again, in the inquiry, the hearings that we had with the RAT committee last week, when we were being asked about A, have they modelled what the cost is, and B, have they modelled what the cost is in the COVID-19 environment, that it hasn't been done. Exactly what the economic impact of these extra costs is going to be, that has not been modelled. And it certainly hasn't been modelled looking at in the environment we are now going to be in, where we know that aviation is not going to be the same as it was before, that there's not going to be a quick snapback for aviation and everybody flying again. Travelling, both regionally, travelling nationally, travelling internationally, there is a lot of shaking down to be done. It's going to be a whole new world we're looking at. And has the work been done as to sort of what the impact of these costs in that new world of a post-COVID-19 environment is going to be? No, they haven't. They haven't done that work. And so given that, it seems to me that the only responsible thing to do is to not impose these extra costs on regional Australia. I'd be very happy to see these regulations be disallowed and then for the government to realise, OK, we're going to have to think through this a bit more thoroughly and work out how to get these changes, how to make air travel safer, how to make air travel more affordable for people right across our country, how to do that in a more equitable way. And that's the work that has not been done so far. That's the work that the Greens want to see being done, to actually work out what is the future for aviation in Australia in a post-COVID environment. What are the costs? How do we apportion those costs fairly across the whole community? And in the meantime, with that work not having been done, we are very happy to support disallowing these regulations.
Thank you, Senator Rice. Senator Reynolds.
Thank you, Madam Deputy President. The government does not support this motion. The Aviation Transport Security Amendment, Security Controlled Airports Regulations 2019, deliver on recommendations made by the Inspector of Transport Security to enhance the safety of regional aviation.
Senator Patrick.
I'll just rise with my right of reply. Look, I thank all the senators for their contribution tonight, and I am pleased to hear that there's a change in mood from the government in relation to this. What I heard the national senators say is that there will be no cost throughout the COVID period for security. That's actually had already been announced, but that they will move to a model where there is non-differential pricing right across Australia. Now, if I go back to my recommendations in the original Senate inquiry that we did in the last Parliament, you'll find exactly that recommendation in there, where we looked at airport security from a national perspective. So I'll just make the observation, because I would like this put to a vote, that politics is about positioning. It's not about policy, it's about positioning for the right policies. And I think work across the last month or so, as this motion vote came to a final point, has forced the government to do something, and I think all in the chamber can take some credit for forcing a change. And I will say I will move the disallowance and ask that it be voted upon. I accept that there is an offer of future change that appears to be on the table, but of course the government will have to follow through with that.
Thank you, Senator Patrick. The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Aye. Those against say no. No. I think the noes have it. I call the clerk.
Business of the Senate, notice of motion. Sorry, Senator.
Senator Patrick.
With the leave of the chamber, can I just ask if the major parties could indicate their position? I know that Senator Reynolds indicated no. Was that the case with you as well? Okay, weren't going to support it? Thank you.
I call the clerk. Oh, sorry, Senator Rice.
To note that the vote of the Greens should be recorded as in supporting the disallowance.
So noted.